Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, Sofia Smallstorm returns to the show. Sophia discusses her research into whether glyphosate is linked to the deaths of racehorses. And so without further ado, here's Sophia. Well, friends, we have a really good show today, in the words of Ed Sullivan. Sophia's back with us, and we're going to talk about her February 2019 newsletter, which Sophia has made some very important potential linkages between glyphosate and racehorses. There's an issue out there today that I was unaware of about the death of racehorses, and so we're going to talk about that newsletter, and this is a very important topic.
Thank you, Mike. It's always nice of you to invite me on and to read my newsletters as diligently as you do and highlight them, right? Did you highlight this one?
I did highlight, see?
Oh.
There you go.
All right. So, Mike, all this started very innocently. I watched Secretariat, the movie, on television for the second time. And the second time I was just blown away by this animal and how amazing he was. And the horse that lost to him at the 1973 Kentucky Derby by the name of Sham. Sham and Secretariat were actually cousins. And I then heard on TV that the Santa Anita Park racetrack in Arcadia, which is near LA, was having this horrible rash of horses stumbling and falling and breaking their lower leg bones or injuring them and having to be put down. And Santa Anita on TV, they said between December 26th and the end of February, which is basically 2 months, there were already 19 horses, and then the following week it was up to 21 that had to be euthanized. They used to shoot them in the old days, but now they euthanize them directly on the track sometimes. And first of all, it's horrifying to think they have to do this just because a horse stumbles and falls. Why? So I Googled it and I found out that horses have these burly bodies and thoroughbreds have these very thin legs. And if they fall and injure, or if they injure a leg, they cannot stand on 3 legs. They cannot support that weight. They weigh like 1,000 pounds, and the 3 legs will not take the 1,000 pounds. So there is really no way to rehabilitate a severe or even moderately severe injury on a racehorse. And they develop this thing called laminitis, this inflammatory condition in the working legs if they're standing on 3 legs, which is the bones warp, and then the bones start buckling and pushing through the hoofs, and they're not going to survive anyway. So they just take them out right then and there rather than have to, have them suffer. But I started to really research racehorses after Secretariat and the travails of his owner, Penny Tweedy, who was trying to pay for all of her debt on her farm. And the winnings were pretty impressive then. She turned down an offer to sell Secretariat back in the early 70s for $8 million. And today, these horses, my God, it's brain-boggling how much money is traded over them and the bets. So let's let you ask some natural questions so that I don't dominate.
Well, first of all, I knew about shooting horses or euthanizing them if they broke a leg. I have to be honest that I really didn't know why, but you've explained that now. And also, as I went through the newsletter, I knew that racehorses could cost a lot of money, but some of the numbers that you have in the newsletter are staggering. And I was also a bit surprised to find that was it Dubai that is heavily into racehorsing?
Yes. They want to be the premier venue for horse racing in the world. And the purse there is $12 million for 2019.
Yeah. So there's an extraordinary amount of money that's tied into horse racing. I never paid much attention to it, Sophia. I mean, I knew like the Kentucky Derby would be coming up and stuff like that. But I have to be honest that I paid very little attention to horse racing.
So let's start with some way back history, okay? So horses appear in cave paintings and even in Ice Age art. And these are advanced versions of what zoologists call Eohippus, E-O-H-I-P-P-U-S, hippus, Hippus. And he was an omnivorous little browser, and he actually had toes. And we are told that he scampered around on the soft soil of prehistoric forests. So from Eohippus came Orohippus, Epihippus, Mesohippus, Miohippus, and something called Tippus, and there was a Chippus and a Sippus, and finally we got this Equus. So Equus is the Latin term, the scientific term for the modern horse. And the horses that we have in America, the Mustangs, were actually brought here by Spaniards in the 1400s. And some of them ran off and got lost and repopulated in the wild, and they became the American Mustang. There had been horses on the North American continent, and it's theorized that North America was the first place ever to have any horses, these ancient varieties of horses, but they disappeared. So why would the horse even become extinct anywhere? And I had read a book a long time ago called The Man Who Listens to Horses, and it features this Monty Roberts from Salinas, California. This was a fascinating book. He was the real horse whisperer. There was a fictional movie called The Horse Whisperer that came out as well. I think this was in the 90s or something. But Roberts, as a young boy, was able to determine the different body language of carnivores and herbivores. And he noticed that, when you come upon a carnivore face to face, it's going to bare its teeth and snarl at you if it feels threatened, right? And it shows you its fangs. And the message is, look at my sharp teeth. I could hurt you. An herbivore, like a horse, they don't have sharp teeth. So they will go sideways to you and back off and shy away if they feel frightened, and they usually do. And they start to make a chewing motion with their lips, just chewing, which shows you their teeth, which are all like stubby. And they're telling you, look at my teeth. I only chew on grass. I'm no threat to you. And this language enabled Roberts to become a really incredible horse trainer. He learned how to approach a wild horse, how to talk to it in its own language, look at it sideways, not confront it directly. And he became a really amazing horse trainer in California, and I think he was flown all over. But basically, the horse is a flight animal, and he makes this demarcation between fight animals and flight animals. And the horse does not have much defense. It can run and it can kick, but it really, really relies on sprinting away from danger. Therefore, horses can really, really run. So horses, for instance, in the wild are, the only thing that can really outrun a horse is a big cat, one of the wild cats that you will see in North America, wherever, Asia, even. And the big cats will jump onto the shoulder blades of a horse. It's called the withers. And they will bite its neck, and they will try to damage its spinal cord to paralyze it, to make it fall. And then the cat finishes the horse off. Or the cat will go to the ground with the horse and then try to bite it in the neck to shut off the air supply. So the horse really has to be fast. And there are the wild dogs that will, in a pack, go for a horse. One will grab the nose, the other will grab the tail, they'll attack the flanks. So horses don't have antlers, they don't have horns, they really can only run, and they can really run. And another thing that's a very important piece to this, the survival of the horse, because it's theorized that the horse would never have survived, because it just isn't fashioned well enough to really defend itself from predators. So as an animal of speed and flight, the Eurasian horsemen of the steppes had the bright idea, now this is going way back to the Bronze Age, had the bright idea to get on the back of a horse and start riding it. And they did this. And therefore, this combination of man and horse made that population the dominant humans. And they began to conquer the other clans and tribes and peoples around them. So this archaeologist called David Anthony had been already putting this theory together. I read about it in an article in Harper's Magazine back in 2002 by John Jeremiah Sullivan called Horsemen Pass By, and I never forgot this. And I am going to read from that article. The species, both species, that's horses and humans, Equus and Homo sapien, never looked back. What had been separate destinies were woven together in a double helix. The horse was saved from the extinction it had been headed inexorably toward, and the people became riders. These riders, speaking their harsh Proto-Indo-European language, were not only able to spread their culture at formerly unimaginable speeds, but also to put the fear of God into whomever they met. So the conquerors of the world were those who rode horses. And therefore, horses saved humans, and humans saved horses. Or horses boosted humans, right?
Yep.
So this all came out in a 2007 book by David Anthony called The Horse, the Wheel, and Language, How Bronze Age Riders from the Eurasian Steppes Shaped the Modern World.
It's interesting how humans took an animal, the horse, which is really a non-aggressive animal, and used it for aggressive means. Also, Sophia, going back for a second, you talked about carnivores and herbivores. You did have a blurb in the newsletter about cows where you were trying to take pictures, and they were positioning themselves so that you couldn't take a picture other than, I guess, the side or from behind, right?
Yeah, their butts. I went to this pasture that was near my house. Now it's all been filled and graded and it's a development, but there was always the cow pasture, and I had my camera and I jumped out of my car and I wanted to photograph these adorable, moody cows, and all they did was turn their butts to me over and over and over.
And basically what they're saying is, leave me alone, right?
Yeah, but they also didn't perceive me as a threat because they were willing to turn their backs to me. They just wanted to avoid me.
Yeah.
And they did not want to look at me head on. And that could be because they're not a fight animal, right? So I couldn't take pictures of anything but their hindquarters and their tails.
So now we're saying that man has essentially is using the horse in order to engage in its warring or its imperialism, and later on it became work, right? Plowing fields and stuff like that, and so on. So I guess where we're going with this, or where you're going with it, is we're starting to see now this affinity that humans have with horses.
Yeah, you know, the lineage of horses, that was the first form of any written record of lineage. It preceded modern eugenics, or even old-time eugenics of humans. But the first horse breeding record, in fact, I just bought, it was called the General Stud Book by James Weatherby. It appeared in 1791. And then I think there was an official registry of equine aristocracy before any that there was for human beings. And it's theorized that horse breeding actually seeded the human eugenics movement, because they were trying to, pick out the best strains in humans as well. So horses have been bred for a long time, and there is an art to it. There are people who really specialize in crossing horses, and they have tried. It's said, I'm reading this amazing book. If you like horses at all, read the book Sham, S-H-A-M, by Phil D'Andrea, D-A-N-D-R-E-A. And I'm telling you, you're going to learn so much about horses, horse racing. It's a phenomenal book. And Sham is the amazing horse who lost to Secretariat a couple of times. Sham was a cousin of Secretariat. And here's what's amazing, Mike. I found out just by Googling Secretariat that the veterinarian who did the autopsy on him when he died, and he was older when he died, discovered that Secretariat had a 22-pound heart. And a normal horse has a 9 to 10-pound heart. A racehorse has a 10 to 12-pound heart. But this animal, who is also enormous. Secretariat's stride, now just picture this, galloping at top speed, 40 miles an hour, was 25 feet. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's huge.
Absolutely amazing, yeah.
And he had a 22-pound heart. And Sham, his cousin, who lost to him by just a hair at the 1973 Kentucky Derby, had a 19-pound heart.
And in the newsletter, I think you mentioned that the size of the heart comes from the mother.
Yeah, it is the mother's lineage that determines the size of the heart. And I think they shared a grandmother, Sham and Secretariat. But the point of all this is that these horses, it's hard to imagine, they are running at 40 miles an hour. And they're only like 3 years old, 2 and 3 years old, which equates in human age to a kindergartner, a first grader, a second grader, right?
Yeah.
What's happening now is that there is this increase year upon year upon year. We're seeing all these horses having what's called equine breakdown while they're working out on tracks, practicing for the races, and racing. Equine breakdown in the legs. And some of them are having coronaries as well. So first I thought, okay, it's got to be something to do with the track surface, which is what the popular media chorus is. It's the track, it's the track, it's the track. And for a while, the racetrack world had experimented with synthetic tracks, which is really disgusting. This stuff is made of ground up tires and telephone, the plastic insulation casing, and recycled carpet, synthetic carpet fibers, and then it's coated in wax. And the fact is that the number of failures, which means horse breakdown per start, is slightly lower than that of a dirt track or a turf track, which is grass. But the stuff is putrid. My friend was actually invited, because she worked at a recycling plant, to Del Mar Racetrack when they first laid down their synthetic track. And the name is, they go by names like Polytrack. They're made by giant chemical companies. And she said this stuff reeked. It reeked of petroleum, and the poor horses have to run on this. So look, the good news is that most of these tracks that experimented with Polytrack and other synthetics have changed right back to dirt or grass. So that's what I first thought. Oh, it's got to be the track. But it's not. It's not the track. And then my next thought, Mike, was tissue breakdown under enormous stress because of this horrible, noxious, incredibly prevalent chemical called glyphosate.
Now, how did you make that connection, Sophia? That wouldn't be obvious to most people. So I'm assuming you're going to say because you've looked into glyphosate extensively. But, was it that, or did you do some more research to connect those dots?
I just had an aha moment, and then I started thinking about glyphosate and protein synthesis. I've done a couple of newsletters on this. We've done shows on this. And the fact is that glyphosate, which is a man-made molecule that looks exactly like glycine. In fact, it is an analog of glycine. Glycine is biology's simplest amino acid. And our proteins are composed of amino acids. And proteins go into bones. They go into all kinds of tissues. They are a structural material that the body builds itself with. They're in cartilage, and there is a protein. There are all different names for proteins. So the protein found in cartilage, one of them is collagen. We've heard of collagen, right?
Right.
Collagen is composed 33% of collagen. Collagen is a triple helix. It's like a braid, and every third molecule is glycine. So basically, 33% of collagen is made of glycine. And because glycine and glyphosate look the same, the body thinks that glyphosate is glycine, and it starts to build proteins with it. This is called protein synthesis. And now I mentioned in a previous show And a lot of people like this analogy. But glycine, being the simplest, sleekest, most compact amino acid, let's liken it to a very beautifully designed little car, speedy little compact, glorious car of, let's call it European design, right off the assembly line, right?
Right.
And driving that car is a pleasure. But now you have this other car that's identical, except it has one difference. The difference between glycine and glyphosate is the nitrogen atom, which has a side chain in it. I call it overpacked. There's a methylphosphonyl chain of atoms in this nitrogen, there is a methylphosphonyl chain in the nitrogen atom. And that makes the nitrogen bulky. And that's the equivalent. Let's go back to our car analogy. That sleek, gorgeous little European car that's a pleasure to drive. The man-made analog of it, we'll call that car glyphosate. It has a door stuck open, and you can't close that door. Now you have to drive a car with the door open all the time. What's going to happen? Is that car going to be a pleasure to drive? No. It's going to swerve. It's going to be unbalanced. The wind is going to hit it. It's going to buff it. It's going to bang into stuff. It's not going to fit in parking spaces. And that's what happens when your collagen is built with glyphosate instead of glycine. It does not perform properly, and it doesn't hold water. So the beauty of collagen is that it's supple and it holds water. If you make it out of glyphosate, it's going to be brittle, and it's not going to hold water, and it's going to break down.
And I just want to mention, Sophia, in case some of the audience is not familiar with collagen, but it's a principal component of bones and joints.
Now, 25% of the proteins in your body are collagen. They are collagen proteins. And 25 to 33%, I would go for 33% of what's in collagen, the amino acids in collagen, is glycine. So we're talking about a big chunk of the glycine being glyphosate. So if 25% of the proteins in your body are collagen and a third of what's making up collagen is glyphosate, 1/4 times 1/3, isn't that 1/12?
Yeah.
1/12 of your body is glyphosate. It's built out of glyphosate. Think about it. And glyphosate is brittle, and it makes the proteins crash and bang. Now picture the horses running on the track at 40 miles an hour under extreme stress, and their proteins are brittle. Even the keratin in the hoofs has collagen in it, and that's not the right kind of collagen. And it's not the right kind of collagen in their bones, not the right kind in their joints. All the hinge joints of their legs have the wrong kind of protein in them. So this is why you're getting this equine breakdown. So that's what I was thinking of, because I had done investigation into Dr. Stephanie Seneff's work, her paper written with Anthony Samsel. You can Google it. There's a white paper, and then there's an article as well. I'll give you the link, Mike, and you can post that about glyphosate and glycine in protein synthesis. It is really remarkable. So the point being here that this is happening in humans too, Mike. It's happening in humans because little children who are out on the ball field playing softball and, doing their sports, team sports, are having orthopedic injuries at a skyrocketing rate. And racehorses are having equine breakdown at a skyrocketing rate. And it's not just at Santa Anita, it's at tracks all over.
I was just going to mention that. I remember reading in your newsletter that this is just not that Santa Anita track, that this is something that's taking place. It's pervasive. So it's not isolated. So for them to say, oh, it's the track, you have to question that because it's not just that one place in which the horses are, falling down and breaking bones.
Right. It's not a track issue and it's not a fluke. So one of the most recent casualties at Santa Anita was a 4-year-old filly named Let's Light the Way. And she was euthanized after shattering the sesamoid, I think that's how you pronounce it, and that's a bone in the ankle. So her owner is Hall of Fame trainer Ron McAnally, and he said, this is directly from the newspaper Washington Post, that she took a bad step or something. You know, I think the weather has a lot to do with it. Southern California has had rain. He said, Santa Anita is a wonderful track and they've done all kinds of tests. I don't know what else they can do. It's a fluky thing. But no, Mike, it's not a fluky thing. And I'm now in a little discussion group I've had the great fortune to get to know Dr. Seneff and Dr. Samsel, and there are a couple of vets in this group, and there are some horse owners, racehorse owners. There are people who specialize in doing horse clinics for physical and other stress management. And they're all aware of the glyphosate issue, but they have been trying to get this out into the horse world for years, and nobody is listening.
I was just going to ask that. I was going to ask if this is something that has been around a while and folks like yourself have surmised that this could be a possible cause.
There are all kinds of horse health issues going on. There are mares that are aborting, and there's a lab that HRI Labs in Iowa, you can Google it, HRI Labs, does a urine test for glyphosate, and it will do human samples as well. They're working now on developing a hair test for glyphosate. It's not an expensive test, the urine test. It's $99. So you can have your own body samples tested for glyphosate, and certainly horses and other animals. And here's the thing. Let's look at the money for a minute, Mike. The reason this really grabbed my attention was I felt that horse racing and race horses can become now a platform or a tool to expose this glyphosate issue worldwide, because the injuries are worldwide. I'm just going to read you some stats. The racing season begins in August. It goes August to the end of July the next year. So August 2016 to the same time in 2017, 137 horses died on Australian racetracks. That's one every 2.6 days. And the majority from catastrophic limb injuries, breaks, tears, fractures of the foreleg. So there's a website, horseracingwrongs.com. I read there that there were 953 fatal consequences to racehorses on the track just in America in 2015. 953. So you will see that the tracks are all over the country. Tampa Bay, Belmont, Aqueduct, Lone Star, Pimlico. There's a track in Hawaii. There's tracks everywhere. And it's happening all over the place. So what we have to bear in mind is how much money is spent on these horses, Mike. And you buy a horse at auction. You buy it as a baby before it's ever run a race. And because of its lineage, its pedigree, its breeding, who its sire is, who its dam is, who their sires and dams were, that means parents, right? You pay millions for a horse because of its potential. So before it's ever run a race, people are shelling out. Now, these are the most wealthy people in the world. They're sheiks from the Middle East. They're old aristocracy from America and Britain. They're the new wealth. There are Japanese millionaires and billionaires. There are people from India investing in horses. They're all over the world, flying in and buying these horses at auction for millions of dollars. Then the purses are enormous. Like we said, in Dubai, it's 12 million. So there's the amount of time and money invested in training this horse. And I learned that a lot of the trainers and jockeys actually are set up to take part of the winning purse, right? So everybody's invested in this. And so these horses are then put out as 2-year-olds and even younger on the track to start running. And they're 3 years old running, and they're running at 40 miles an hour. And what's the equivalent in human age? The 2-3-year-old horse is like a kindergartner, first grader, second grader. So imagine if we did this to children. We put them out on the track to race. We bet millions and millions of dollars on them. And we race them for prizes of millions of dollars, right? And we fed them all this glyphosate-laden food. and they fell down and broke their legs and had terrible orthopedic injuries. And these horses are running at 40 miles an hour, 1,000 pounds at 40 miles an hour. And they're having, the term is equine breakdown. And I reasoned they're eating tubs of oats, alfalfa, they sleep in straw, they have hay in their diet, they're drinking fluoridated water as well, many of them. But glyphosate, let's remind ourselves, is the world's most prevalent toxin. It was designed, are you ready for this, as a chelator, a mineral chelator in factory chimneys. And now it's become part of the GMO picture, right?
Right.
In the herbicide Roundup. Roundup is prepared so that it kills weeds, and Roundup ready crops are resistant to being sprayed with these toxins, these herbicides. Glyphosate is a major ingredient of Roundup, and it's also been used since, early 90s at least, and possibly in the 1980s. It was patented by a Monsanto chemist in 1974 as an antimicrobial for plants. It is used as a desiccant, a drying agent on all the small grain crops, on sugar beets, on anything that is like grassy or grainy, because what it does is it starves the plant of water, and then the plant starts shrinking, and then it's easier to harvest because now it's more brittle. It's not all flexible and full of water. So you can hack it down much more easily, and it's shrinking in size, so you can fit more in the transport trucks. So legumes, beans, lentils, sugar beets, sugar cane, all the grain crops, wheat, and then there's corn, soy. These are all glyphosate-riddled foods.
Has the patent expired also, Sophia?
Yes, it was taken off patent, I think in 2007. And it's just amazing how many people are making and using glyphosate. China is a major manufacturer of glyphosate, and it's being shipped everywhere. And yet, I think it's 99.9% of the glyphosate that's used in the world doesn't ever meet contact with a weed. Never.
Yeah, I bring that up because that means it makes it far more pervasive once the patent has expired.
That's right. It's far more prevalent. Yeah. And so these horses are getting it. They're getting it in their oats. They're getting it in the stuff they sleep in. They're breathing it in the air. I mean, it's in the air and water and everything that we breathe and drink. And I just want to tell you, Mike, a new study came out from Restore, the product that I sell. And I want to encourage people, if they haven't tried Restore, now is the time. And if you buy it from me, avatarproducts.com, you get a free pump. So that's my little gift. Restore just released a white paper with findings that 23% of the glyphosate in your body is eliminated by Restore, and the claim that they make is in 2 weeks. That's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
2 weeks of Restore is going to take down 1/5 of the glyphosate in your body. But I do know for a fact that Restore closes the junctions. It brings the cells together in your gut wall, so it prevents glyphosate from escaping. Because the reasoning of the body is this: escaping into the bloodstream, where it then starts coursing through your body and it starts getting itself into your amino acid pool and into your proteins. So glyphosate the body cannot assess it or do a damn thing with it. It cannot disassemble it. It doesn't know what it is. Once it finds out it's not glycine. Glyphosate is what makes gluten intolerable for people. So when your body recognizes, oh my gosh, I have this indigestible thing in me and I don't know what it is, I got to get rid of it. It opens the gut wall. There's a protein in your body called zonulin that is released, and the zonulin tells the gut wall to separate and open up and make openings, because the body is trying to draw water from the bloodstream because it wants to get this glyphosate out of it by way of your butt, right? So that's what gives people leaky gut, and Restore closes that gut wall against glyphosate escaping. That's another thing that Restore does.
Now, you said something very interesting, Sophia, and I think a lot of people want to hear a little bit more about it. You said that glyphosate is responsible for gluten or involved in gluten intolerance?
Gluten is a protein, and glyphosate is in that protein instead of glycine. And the body cannot stand glyphosate. When glyphosate is in proteins, it makes proteins indigestible. It makes them so that you can't disassemble them. It's very confusing biologically. Glyphosate is like the amino acid glycine. If glycine is found somewhere and you're living in an environment that's heavy with glyphosate, then the likelihood is that wherever glycine is supposed to be, now you have glyphosate.
Okay, well, this is very interesting. This is going to be of interest to a lot of folks listening, because I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening have gluten intolerance. And I always found it interesting, not to digress a little bit, but gluten intolerance in my world kind of just came upon us kind of quickly. That's how I looked at it, you know? And I always wondered what was the reason for it, because I don't remember growing up and even into my later years having people complaining about gluten intolerance or the symptoms of gluten intolerance. So this may explain why today it's very prevalent. A lot of people struggle with gluten intolerance, and we have an entire food industry dedicated to making gluten-free products for that very reason.
If foods contain proteins, and those protein, the recipe coded by the DNA in wherever that protein is found, whether it's in a plant or a body or a mammal or a fish or whatever, if the DNA codes for glycine to be part of that protein, then the body will grab glyphosate and try to build the protein out of it. Let's take the example of myosin. Myosin is another protein. It's found in muscle tissue, muscle fibers, and it's the protein that enables muscles to contract. Now, contraction of muscles is what you need to be able to do anything, to walk, to lift something up, also to go to the bathroom. Because you have smooth muscle, that's what your intestines are. They're made of smooth muscle. And they have to be able to contract, do that peristalsis, which is the undulation of the intestinal tissue to get your digested food out of you. And we're having all these children, they're taking baby laxatives because the myosin in their bodies, the protein in the muscles that tells the muscles how to contract, is not being made right, and it's failing. So people who are constipated are having issues possibly due to the fact that myosin, the proteins that tell their intestines to contract and push this stuff out, not happening. Because once you get glyphosate into your proteins misfire and they fail and they don't perform as needed.
What a mess. And so the Restore, which you and I have talked about before, will help folks or should help folks that are suffering from gluten intolerance and the such?
Definitely, and many, many other things. I mean, I don't want this to be a show about Restore because we've already done one, and we might link to that show from in your description or your links. But yeah, Mike, I couldn't believe I got the good news from Restore that they said they've done a clinical trial and 23% of the glyphosate after just a matter of weeks is already gone. So you can so in this group that I have been privileged to be part of, there are horse specialists who have figured out protocols to detox horses from glyphosate. And one horse specialist that I met recently in Island Horse Supply in Vashon, Washington, they have a protocol that uses Restore, by the way, if you can believe it, for horses. I really feel that we have to get the horse racing world focused on the fact that they must make an effort to look beyond the racetrack. This is not the racetrack. It is not a fluke that all these horses are falling down and breaking their forelegs and injuring their joints and ankles and the equivalent of their knees. It is not a fluke. And it's not genetic, right? It doesn't go up to some, grandsire they have in their pedigree. It's the fact that the tissues, the cartilaginous tissues, the bones, the hoofs of these horses, hey, there's collagen in your blood vessels. And some of these horses are literally having coronaries on the track. Their blood vessels are blowing up. So you have to look at the intense pressure that they're under when they do workouts, I'm reading in this book, Sham, that are the equivalent of their races. And they are stabled at the tracks. And they train on the tracks, and they're falling down in training, not just in the races.
this situation with the horses, the race horses, because of all the money that's involved here, could put a nail in the coffin of glyphosate. That was my thought, because there's a lot of money invested in race horses, and if this is actually contributing to the horses breaking legs and having to be put down after people have spent and invested millions upon millions of dollars, it could open the door to a closer look at something that we've been talking about for a very long time that is not good for us and good for nature.
All right. You mentioned before that horses were put to work on farms, but they also were used by militaries, and they made those militaries that much more powerful, the cavalry, right?
Right.
So there are so many war names for these peaceful animals. War emblem, lord at war, man o' war. I can't believe it. But anyway, I'm going to talk about a horse called War Emblem. He was born in 1999. He was the grandson of Lord at War. And War Emblem won the Kentucky Derby. Just nobody expected it. Nobody actually heard of him. And he was at that time owned by a sheik in Saudi Arabia. And he had been, it was a 90% share that Sheikh Salman, Ahmed bin Salman, Prince actually, had bought 90% of War Emblem for $1 million. So War Emblem won the Kentucky Derby. I don't think he did that well thereafter. He was kind of a head case, they said, and this is sort of funny to picture, but his very first race, he pitched his jockey and ran into the parking lot, ran right out of the paddock. So he did bring in about $3.5 million, after which, now their careers are very short, these horses. And you think of it, I think of it in the equivalent of ice skaters, the figure skaters. They're all in their teens, in their early 20s. Once you hit 30, you cannot do this in the Olympics anymore, the triple axel and all of that. So War Emblem was sold to the Yoshida racing family who had a farm in Japan. He was sold for $17.7 million to be their lead stud. Okay. And this would have been in the early 2000s. So War Emblem, these horses are studded out for a ton of money. And War Emblem was expected to make money for this Shaddai stallion station in Japan. But he wasn't interested in mares. He didn't want to go near them. And Shaddai Stables figured it had lost over $55 million in stud fees because of War Emblem showing this distaste for mating. They call it covering. So he was shown in 2003, 350 mares. He was booked with 300. Now that's how many days in a year, right? And he covered, meaning he actually got on top of only 7 of them. And Shaddai Farms gave up on him. They actually got an insurance payout because he wouldn't breed for $13.3 million. And now I'm going to read you some stud fees. There was a horse in 2016 called American Pharaoh. He brought in $200,000 for every healthy foal that his mating produced. And his stablemate, Giant Causeway, $85,000 a pop. And this other horse, Tappet, they got $300K for him. And the mares can only produce 1 horse per year, 1 foal, but those sell for millions of dollars, 5 million, 10 million, before they've ever raced. So look at the money, right? The stud fees. Once a horse races, it wins a few $1 million in purses. Maybe it's not even that great, but if it has a great pedigree, if it's part of, I don't know how many horses. Let me see what he said here in this article. There are thousands of descendants of Secretariat today.
Is that right? Is thousands?
If they're mating every single day and they're producing foals year after year after year, and those animals are mating and producing, you got to look at it's all a big, huge, pool, a spreading pool of genes.
Yeah. And so the point really being is you're substantiating what I had said, which was there's tremendous amounts of money in this business. So what do you think that's going to do as far as glyphosate? Does it mean, Sophia, that there's going to be testing now to test if glyphosate is in a horse's body? And is that going to impact the racing business or the investment in horses? How do you think that's going to work?
Well, here's how I look at it, Mike. If horses are not even making it to their super productive years as studs and breeding mares, where they can produce millions and millions of dollars, let's do the math. I understand this is per foal born, but let's look at War Emblem. I had his stats here. He wasn't even very productive, all right? But his second year, which is very mediocre for a horse, 19 colts and 15 fillies, so that's 19 plus 15, that's 34 times, let's just say he got $200K. That is $6,800,000 in stud fees, right?
Yeah.
And one mare producing a baby horse, because it's descended from Secretariat or War Admiral or one of these horses, or Seabiscuit, it's going to be worth $5 million, $8 million.
Yeah.
So my point is, in humans, we don't do this. A doctor doesn't marry a lawyer and have a baby and say, we're going to send him to Harvard and Yale, and he's going to go to law school here or med school there, and he's going to be worth this much to us every year. We're going to be set in our retirement because his earnings are going to make us flush. You don't do that with people. It's kind of a wild card how successful somebody's going to be. I mean, they could grow their hair long and join a rock band, right? They're not all going to become what you think they are. But this racing world is different. These people are counting on the earnings that the pedigree of their horse and hopefully the performance of their horse in races, they're counting on those earnings. And if that horse is going to fall down at 3 years old and break its leg and have to be euthanized, well, then what happened? They just spent millions of dollars, maybe 10, maybe 15 million, getting this horse ready to produce millions every year for them. And it's not going to happen. So the glyphosate clearing protocols are doable. And here's my thesis. Every cell in your body, every cell type has a replenishment or reproduction or replacement cycle. Some cells are replenished every 2 weeks. It all depends what tissues they're in. Some cells every 2 years. There's all this different cycle length depending on the tissues. So you can theoretically clear glyphosate, and then you can make sure that your horse or you as a human being or your children are free of glyphosate exposure to the extent that you can manage that. And let's talk about the racehorses. Any prince or noble aristocrat that decides to keep his or her horses free of glyphosate, those are the horses that are not going to fall down and die. Those are the horses that are going to prevail, that are going to live, and that are going to win because they'll be alive to do so.
What's really scary about the whole thing is the amount of damage that glyphosate has done. All living creatures are affected by it because it's pervasive, it's everywhere. I'm personally hoping, Sophia, with this, that, and I don't know, whether I'm just wishful thinking, but because of the money involved, that this opens up the door to really, really digging into glyphosate, to really digging into what this stuff is and how wicked and evil it is, and getting it out of our lives. And I know that's, like I said, probably wishful thinking, but I'm hoping that something comes of this. I really do. I really feel bad for the horses. And I know there's a lot of folks, you and I talked about this before we got started with the show. There are a lot of animal lovers amongst us, me being one of them, and we care more about the plight and the lives of animals than we do sometimes of human beings. So I'm hoping that this show that we're doing gets some traction with people, and especially folks who are listening that are in the horse racing business, and they can start digging in and maybe putting some pressure on what's going on here.
Well, there's always the possibility that people will prevail by example. Those breeders, those owners, those trainers that make sure that their horses are getting glyphosate-free food and bedding are going to have horses that have better bones and joints and hoofs, that don't fall and have this equine breakdown risk looming over them, that live and that win. I mean, it's that simple, Mike.
Yeah, it is. But okay, so I'm thinking, all right, yeah, no, it is that simple, but I'm hoping it gets broader than that. In other words, I'm hoping that a lot of noise is made about it versus, hey, I'm just going to shift my feed to, let's say, organic, and I'm going to make sure that my horses are taken care of. So, of course, that's going to get done. But I'm hoping that a much broader awareness is put out there, that it's not just isolated to, I'm going to take care of my yard and I'm not going to worry about anybody else's. I'm hoping that it becomes more ubiquitous as far as understanding what this stuff is. And this stuff is altering life.
Well, the good news is this is all potential.
Yeah.
That the people who buy these horses, who can spend $5 million, $10 million on a horse, seriously, and pay $200,000 for a stud fee, these people are the top money holders and earners in the world, right?
Right.
And they have some clout. And maybe one friend of mine put it this way. It was a beautiful description. This could be Clash of the Titans, where these people are powerful enough, moneyed enough to go up against. And now it's not just Monsanto.
Yeah, that's the point I was on, that there would be this clash, right? Money versus money. And it's sad that it has to be that way, but I mean, this is the world that we live in, and money talks, everything else walks. So maybe something good will come of it, because clearly blaming the racetrack when in your newsletter you've shown that this is pervasive. I mean, this is all over the world, various racetracks across the country and the rest of the world. So that's not going to be a good enough answer. They're going to have to, the people that are affected by this in their horses are going to have to dig deeper.
Mike, I actually tried. I was maybe naive, but I tried to reach out to people in the horse racing world. I got through to a couple of racetracks, to the PR people. I had what I felt was support from the racetracks. Of course, they don't want their tracks to be blamed for this, right?
Right.
I reached out to the chief veterinarian in California, equine veterinarian. I actually called his office number. It was listed on the UC Davis website. He answered the phone, and I asked him if I could share some information with him that might explain the rash of racehorse deaths at Santa Anita and elsewhere. And I said, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Seneff from MIT on protein synthesis? And this is what he said to me. He said, this doesn't have anything to do with glyphosate, does it? Mispronounced it. And I said, actually it does. And he said, not interested. Thank you. And that was the end of the call.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, that's unbelievable. So this is what we're dealing with, right? This is why it's so hard to push change across the table. It really is, because you've got gatekeepers, and these are people that, in all likelihood, they think that they're making the right decisions or they're taking the right positions, but they just lay on the tracks. They're not open. They're not receptive to new information.
It's not just that, Mike. I did learn, I have not fact-checked this, but I did learn that UC Davis received $10 million from Monsanto.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Again, money talks, right? So, all right, well, I guess we can still hold out hope that the many people that, and very, very wealthy people that are invested in horse racing and their horses can stir the pot, bypass the vets and people like that are beholden to the money that they're receiving, or whatever benefits or perks that they're getting to keep the lid on the pot.
I feel honestly that if misinformation is repeated often enough, and if it's a soundbite, that's what people will believe. And that's what's happening in the LA area. Everybody is convinced it's the fault of the track. And it's not. It's the track, it's the track, it's the track, because this is what they're hearing. It's the track. Now the DA, the district attorney, is looking into the poor Santa Anita facility because of the track. And they're regrading the track, but it's not the track.
I mean, it's ridiculous. The whole premise is ridiculous. If you take a look around, I mean, you have it in your newsletter at these other tracks where we have the same problem, where horses are breaking legs or limbs and then have to be put down. How do you explain that? I mean, this is a perfect example of people with, they're myopic, just looking at one specific area and they just want to keep it there. And maybe it's intentional, right? It probably is, because if they open the aperture of the camera, then they have a whole lot more explaining to do. And they don't want to do that. So I don't know. I mean, if somebody came to me and said it's your track, I'd be like, well, explain to me how it would be the track.
Well, it's a dirt track at Santa Anita. I think they have a turf track as well, but we've had a lot of rain. And I've been reading this book, Sham, about racehorses and all these races. I mean, he details races and he describes them like you're watching them. The suspense is really good, the way he's written the book. But when it rains, there's what they call a sloppy track, and it's a harder race. And, seriously, it has rained recently in Southern California. We've had gobs of rain. But I guess that could affect the performance of the horses, because think about it. If your hoofs are digging into softer or muddier dirt, right, then you're going to have more resistance, and you're still having to run at close to 40 miles an hour. And so that amount of resistance, it's like being in a little bit of a swampy condition. That's what causes your legs to break. You stumble, right? And then you have the bad proteins in your tissues that don't function properly, that malperform. And so you're going to have injury.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. It's just that in the statistics that you had in the newsletter to me, all I'm saying, Sophia, is that the investigation needs to be broadened, because when you have, in 2015, you mentioned HorseRacingWrongs.com confirmed 953 fatal consequences to racehorses on the track, and that was just in America, and provided a long list of fatalities for each year at all different tracks. And you mentioned it before: Golden Gate, Tampa, Belmont, Aqueduct, Lone Star, and so on. So I think that they need to look beyond their nose, because what's going to happen, right? Well, I mean, I guess that racetrack will probably get sued, and then what? Go out of business? And I don't know.
I don't know. No, they'll probably go back to synthetic tracks, surface, because the number of fatalities or injuries or breakdowns per start, like they go by 1,000 starts. Per 1,000 starts, it's 1.74 or something like that. Anyway, don't go by those numbers, but the numbers are slightly better by a hair for the synthetic tracks versus the dirt and turf tracks. But why are the horses failing to start with? This is what you have to look at. Why are this many horses becoming injured? Now, another theory is that they worked so hard that they develop these very fine stress fractures. And then when they race or they do their pre-race training, that's when the weak link breaks. But I don't think that's the case. I think they have faulty tissues in their bones, in their joints, in their hoofs to start with. And it's because the collagen contains glyphosate instead of the proper glycine. Glycine, let's remember, is a very supple triple helix in its construction, and it is able to hold water. When a tissue holds water, hey, Mike, let's just look at a very old person that's all wrinkly and dry, and we know that their collagen, they don't have the same elastin, and maybe that is exacerbated by the fact that their proteins don't have the proper molecule in them. They have glyphosate. So our degeneration in human beings, not just our skin, but our bones, our joints, we're seeing it in human beings, degenerative disease, this degeneration of muscle tissue, the atrophy, because there's no myosin that's working right. There's no, so people are losing strength, and they're losing the integrity of their bones, and they're having all these, osteoporosis.
Yeah. Yep. Well, this has been a fabulous newsletter, Sophia. It really has been. I mean, your research really, I've said this many times before, is superb. You're able to connect dots, and then once you connect the dots, you're able to communicate it out there in a way that people can understand it. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about with regard to the newsletter, or did you want to talk about any products in your store or anything like that?
I would urge people to try the laundry powder. There's a wonderful soap maker who has provided me now with lots of her fantastic laundry powder. I think you have some, Mike.
Yep.
It's in the store. It's Castile soap and laundry powder. It's under that entry. It's made of Castile soap, borax, washing soda, and baking soda. And seriously, just a tiny bit, like a teaspoon, is all you really need to use. Or it's an ounce. An ounce is all, just edit that for me. An ounce is all you need to use, which is very little, and it makes your clothes so fragrant, it's great for whites.
What I've noticed about it is that, and you can tell folks I'm a little domesticated, is that when you wash the clothes, even without a fabric softener, the clothes come out very soft. So, sometimes you wash clothes and you use these store detergents and the clothes come out like cardboard. They're very stiff. You don't have that with this soap.
Yeah, the Castile soap that this laundry powder is made from leaves no residue. And actually the manufacturer told me that engineers and scientists buy the Castile soap because it leaves no residue. And people with very, very sensitive skin, they love it. The laundry powder is made of that soap, and the Castile soap in the laundry powder is very concentrated. So literally, I am almost in disbelief that it takes so little. You can even use your laundry scoop, the tiny ones from commercial, whenever you have left over. I always save the scoops. But this tiny little scoop is enough for a decent wash load.
Yeah, no, a little goes a long way. In fact, I'm going to order some after we hang up here because I still have some soap left, but I need to restock.
Yeah, I also have the Himalayan soap berries. I mentioned them before. They are very good as well, and they leave no residue. They're 100% botanical, natural. But here's the thing. The Himalayan soap berries are brown in color, and I would not recommend them for whites, repeatedly washing whites. I would recommend Christine's laundry powder for whites and Himalayan soap berries or the soap berry liquid for colored. And you will have the most exciting washing experience. Listen to me.
Yep. And you also have Restore?
Yes, so that and Restore. Restore comes in a sinus spray. There's 2 sizes. There's a 16 ounce for 1 month. They say to take a tablespoon a day, but I have come away with the experience that you can take less. You can take 2 teaspoons. I'm a small person. I take 2 teaspoons a day. You can give it to children. Just cut the dose down. You can give it to pets. But seriously, if that paper is correct and within a couple of weeks, 23% of your glyphosate residues are gone because you're using Restore, that's pretty amazing. I had no expectation that that would be the finding.
Now, have they published the paper?
Yeah.
Could you send me a copy of it?
Yes.
Okay. And a link too if we have one, because this way I'll put it in the description box and our listening audience can go read for themselves.
Yes, definitely. So I would love it if people tried it from me. You get a free pump if you buy the 2-month supply. And you should really just try it for at least 2 months. I've had people rave about it. And you raved too, Mike, when you started using it, and I think you still do. So
I still do. I still do. Yep.
And we've got to get the horses. They don't have to just use Restore. There are these other protocols. But I think I would like to pull this work together in some kind of presentation. I mean, even if I have to make a PowerPoint. Imagine the whole thesis decorated with pictures of beautiful racehorses and the story of the racehorses threaded through this exposure of glyphosate. It would be a great thing.
Well, if you do a presentation, Sophia, and you do a PowerPoint, you're going to do a voiceover, let me know, and I'll upload it onto my channel if that's something you're interested in.
One of these days, I'm going to use that as the blueprint for something else. So yes, I do have it in my heart to do this. And I am still gathering information. I really hope that anybody listening who is connected with people who own racehorses would pass this information on to them and have them look into the protocols. They can contact Shelley of Island Horse Supply. She is the owner, and she has come up with a very successful protocol. There's another person that I know who has his own protocol, and he has done the horse clinics for several years trying to get this information through to veterinarians and people who breed and own horses, and he's met with a lot of resistance.
Yeah, well, we both know doing what we do that that's to be expected, but we just have to keep pushing forward, and for those that have ears, eyes to see, then they'll wake up to it and they'll do what they need to do, because hang on, what's going on with these racehorses. Like I said, the newsletter was great. It really opened my eyes, as it always does with your newsletters. But this one hits home because, like I said, I'm an animal lover, and more so, I even have a shirt, folks, that says dogs because people suck. And and I'm not really that cynical, but animals, they don't know any better. They're reliant on us to take care of them. And so if you're not, then it's not a good thing. So, Sofia, again, thank you so much for sharing this newsletter and coming on and talking about it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Mike. It is my pleasure. And I did gallop through this research recently, and I decided I had to write a newsletter on it. And go see the movie Secretariat or rent it, but don't forget about Sham. Sham was second best, and he would have been the greatest animal had he been born the year before. 19-pound heart. Can you imagine this?
Yeah, it's amazing. But both had hearts twice as large as a regular horse, right?
Pretty much, yep.
Amazing.
And we have to have hearts large enough to put these messages of all these things that we know about. We have to have hearts big enough to put all this stuff out there and to keep going.
Very good. That was an excellent, excellent way to say it. Again, Sofia, thank you so much for coming on. And I won't wait so long next time for the next show. I've just been like, I told Sofia, folks, before the show, I just have a lot of other stuff going on because this is not the only thing I do in life. Surprise. But we will catch up because the listening audience really does like the shows that we do together. It's very informative.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your support and for paying this kind of attention to me and to Mike. I really am grateful. Thank you.
And that concludes another Sage or Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Hey there, brother, take a look around. Does it bother you that the world is upside down? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, sister, look out your door. Does it bother you when your child goes to war? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, neighbor, look to the sky. Does it bother you that your life is a lie? Can't you see? You're not free. I know you can be if you try. I know you can be if you try. Hey there, Father, standing in the rain. Does it bother you that you never took the blame? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, mother, time is passing by. Does it bother you if a child doesn't fly? Can't you see? You're not free. Hey there, stranger, have you lost your soul? Does it bother you when you don't even know? Can't you see?